Chapter 13. Abdul. "Niki, Professor Mueller, great to see you," exclaimed Abdul after he had hurriedly squeezed between the patrons crowded around the closely placed tables, ducked under the rainbow-colored umbrellas above them, and joined the waiting couple. "Sorry to be late. The traffic's horrible and parking's impossible. I should have taken the metro." Abdul shook Ari's outstretched hand, then leaned over and kissed Nicole, first on one cheek, then the other. "Wonderful you could join us, Abdy," said Niki with a happy smile. "It's been too long." Ari motioned toward an extra chair he had pulled up to the small table. "Sit down and relax. We've got all evening. At least you and I have. Niki has to be at the hospital in an hour." A 31-year-old Jerusalem-born Palestinian Arab with irrepressible enthusiasm and outgoing personality, Abdul was passionately dedicated to the liberation of his homeland from the Jews. After his parents moved to Paris, he had attended the same high school as Nicole, and they had been close friends for nearly 15 years. When he couldn't settle on a major in university, she had recommended that he try political science. "It fits your personality and special talents," she'd told him. Professor Mueller had become Abdul's favorite teacher at the Sorbonne, so much so that he had urged Niki to take a class from Mueller. Thus, Abdul had played a key role in bringing those two together, another reason why Ari and Niki were so fond of him and had remained in close contact. Since then, Ari had become the head of the political science department. Having worked closely with Abdul in his graduate work for the past 5 years, Ari had developed a great affection for this outstanding young man. Abdul's sharp mind, clear logic, and near photographic memory had made him one of Ari's prize students. He had just gotten his Ph.D. in political science, and Ari was trying to help him find a job worthy of his training and exceptional abilities. "You've heard the news?" Abdul demanded breathlessly as he sat down and pulled his chair up to the table. In the soft glow of twilight, beads of sweat lent a sheen to his slightly pockmarked yet handsome features. Ari had turned away to motion to the waiter, but couldn't get his attention. Now that the sun had gone down and the light was fading, the overworked man was cranking in the large orange awning that extended from the front of the restaurant out over the sidewalk. "About China, you mean?" asked Nicole. "Right," responded Abdul. "Isn't it incredible what's happening?" "We picked it up on shortwave just before we came over here," commented Ari matter-of-factly. "You're not excited?" demanded Abdul. 50,000 students from Beijing University taking to the streets, ignoring threats of expulsion and cordons of police. The last I heard, 250,000 people had joined them. Numbers could soon reach 1 million, marching on Tiananmen Square, defying Deng's government. "For China," admitted Ari, "that's amazing, but it's premature, doomed to fail. Sorry to dampen your enthusiasm." "I disagree," exulted Abdul. "A French government Chinese expert, I forget his name, said Deng's government is caving in. They've agreed to talks with student leaders. The old guard will be swept out. There'll be fresh faces with democratic leanings. Thousands of workers are going out on strike to join the demonstrations. It's even spread to high schools and into the country. There's a historic transformation going on." "I'm with you, Abdy. It's almost unbelievable, but it's really happening." Nicole turned to Ari with a frown. "How can you be so negative?" "I'm just being realistic," responded Ari quietly. "Give it 2, maybe 3 weeks. Beijing's been caught by surprise, and they're off balance for the moment. But when they recover, it'll be a bloody massacre." "Deng wouldn't dare," protested Nicole. "The whole world would be outraged." Abdul nodded vigorously. "This is China," Ari reminded them. "They're already isolated. World opinion means almost nothing." "I'm optimistic," persisted Abdul. "So far, it looks good. And if 1 billion Chinese could shake off communism, what an impact worldwide." Ari shook his head stubbornly. "The Soviets led the world into communism, and they'll have to bring it down. China can't be the one. Anyway, China's not ready yet. The protesters will pay a horrible price." The expression in Abdul's dark eyes conveyed his keen disappointment. "How can you be so sure?" he asked Ari cautiously, hardly daring to contradict the professor who had taught him so much and whom he respected so highly. "You know something we don't?" Ari shrugged. "Maybe. Remember the organization I've mentioned that needs your talents in the Middle East?" "Yeah, I've thought about that. I'm interested." "They've been involved in China for 10 years. That's my information source." Ari caught the waiter's eye and motioned him over to their table. So, messieurs, mademoiselle, what will it be? The chef special for tonight, perhaps? A very tasty canard à l'orange? Just a cup of soup du jour and a dinner salad with vinaigrette for me, said Nicole. And you, monsieur? The duck sounds good, said Ari. How about you, Abdy? Why not? Make that 2 canards à l'orange. Now I'm intrigued, said Abdul, when the waiter had hurried off with the orders. Tell me more about this organization. Ari leaned back and smiled. It's a worldwide student coalition headquartered in London, but don't think I'm of any great importance. I do some consulting, that's all. Nicole gave Ari a "what a liar you are" look and turned away. What's their goal? Asked Abdul. The demise of communism, world transformation, said Ari confidently. Is that big enough for you? Too big. Sounds grandiose, returned Abdul, but there was definite interest in his voice. How are they going about it? Hundreds of underground newspapers. We have more than 100 in Poland alone, reaching millions all over Eastern Europe, in China and elsewhere, including the Soviet Union. Mimeographed bulletins and posters by the thousands, pasted everywhere, producing videos and showing them to millions in secret gatherings of 5, 10, a few dozen people at a time. Students doing all this? Asked Abdul, obviously impressed. Right. They're recruited through scholarships, fellowships, grants, special study programs in key universities. The ultimate weapon, of course, will be massive student demonstrations against oppressive governments worldwide. In the meantime, infiltrating and influencing the state media plays a big part and takes a lot of money. Bribes, that's how communism works. Fortunately, they're well-financed. Interesting. Why haven't I heard of this group at the Sorbonne if they're worldwide? They keep a low profile. You wouldn't know they existed until they recruited you. Like you're doing now? If you're interested. That depends. You say they need someone in the Middle East. Right. They've concentrated on communist regimes, so they've never been established in the Middle East. They need someone to get things started. I haven't lived over there since I was a teenager. That's okay. A fresh look is what we want. You've got the languages. Arabic, of course. I'm rusty on Hebrew, but I'd pick it up again fast. The arrival of their plates brought a momentary change in the conversation to topics of general interest. I don't want Niki to feel left out, suggested Abdul between bites. You and I can talk business after she leaves. You're always such a gentleman, said Nicole, leaning over to pat Abdul on the cheek. Just like Ari, he won't let work interfere with our private lives. But I'm fascinated with the Middle East. So please carry on. I'll listen. Thanks, Niki, responded Ari, and launched into his recruiting effort between bites. To get started in that part of the world, the first thing we need is a thorough, on-the-spot survey of the major universities. What kind of survey? Asked Abdul. Student demographics, live interviews, student opinions on a variety of topics, from Arab-Israeli relationships to honest feelings about their own governments. Sounds intriguing. What's the purpose? Identify, recruit, and train leaders. Then develop a strategy for recruiting Middle East students, organizing them into cells. This is the way it's been done elsewhere? Ari nodded. All over Europe, East and West, millions of students are involved in thousands of cells of about 25 each. No communication between the cells, no mass meetings. Orders come from the top. So if one cell is infiltrated, it doesn't affect the rest of the organization. How's it all held together? That's a secret they've never let me in on. But when the time comes for action, the sheer mass of numbers will be overwhelming, irresistible. Obviously interested now, Abdul had momentarily abandoned his meal to listen. Nicole, too, was following intently. You say when the time comes for action, repeated Abdul. What kind of action? Ari leaned forward and lowered his voice. You know I wouldn't be associated with an organization involved in violent revolution. That only leads to more bloodshed and usually installs a regime more evil than the one being overthrown. Of course, agreed Abdul. So, like you said, the ultimate goal is transformation through peaceful demonstrations? Ari nodded. On a scale so massive that they can't be stopped. That's the only way to achieve lasting change. And it will work. That's what they're trying in China, interjected Nicole. But you say it won't work. Darling, I thought I'd already explained. The timing is wrong. That's a key factor, and that's why this survey is so important in the Middle East. The conversation died momentarily as they all concentrated again on their food. "How's the canard?" asked Nicole, soup spoon poised. "Fantastic," came the immediate response from both men. As he ate, Abdul was deep in thought. "I'm a bit confused," he confessed at last. "I can see massive demonstrations in Israel, and it might work if not just Arabs but Jews too were involved. But in the Arab countries, what's the aim there?" "You should know that," chided Ari. "What's the trend in world governments today?" "Democracy, obviously. The 70-year cycle favoring communism has ended. The pendulum is swinging back toward democracy." "Exactly." "But Marxism hasn't made much impact in the Middle East," protested Abdul. "There's been a lot of Soviet influence in some Arab countries, economic and military assistance, but nobody's buying their political system." "No imperialism and totalitarianism?" demanded Ari. "Yeah, Zionist imperialism. That's the problem. Israel has to give back the land she's taken." "Of course," agreed Ari, "but the Arab countries, can you think of one that has a democratic government, real freedom of the press, and basic human rights?" Abdul laughed uneasily. "I know what you're getting at. We've argued about this. You just don't understand the uniqueness of the Arab world. Islam rules. Whatever the secular form of government, the mullahs and imams and ayatollahs are the real authority. The Quran is the law." "I've never denied that," countered Ari, "but whether the government is religious or secular, whether it claims to follow the Quran or the Bible or the Hindu Vedas or whatever, that's beside the point." "It isn't beside the point," insisted Abdul. "In the Arab world, the Quran is our lifeblood, our standard. It's God's word. There's no higher authority." "Surely you don't defend the treatment of women in Arab countries," cut in Nicole passionately. "Husbands abuse their wives in Christian countries too," responded Abdul with a confident smile. "It can happen anywhere." "But the Quran condones polygamy and wife-beating," persisted Niki. "And the husband can divorce his wife by simply pronouncing it done. The woman has no rights, isn't that true?" Abdul cleared his throat. "It's not that black and white, Niki. There are cultural differences you don't understand. I don't think you or anyone else who's not a Muslim is qualified to pass judgment." "You're avoiding the issue, Abdy," scolded Nicole good-naturedly. "We're not trying to jump on you," Ari assured him, "but the facts are pretty grim. Iraq and Iran have spent 8 years torturing, gassing, bombing, and slaughtering one another by the hundreds of thousands, all in the name of Allah. Saddam Hussein is a ruthless murderer, an Arab Hitler, yet the majority of Arab leaders, who all claim to follow the Quran, hail him as a hero. And Gaddafi and Arafat, are these human beings?" "I'm not defending them," countered Abdul. "They're not good Muslims." "They claim to be," retorted Ari. "I don't hear the mullahs and ayatollahs denouncing them as heretics." "Facts, Abdi, facts. Arab countries, in general, have an abysmal human rights record. True?" "There are problems, sure," agreed Abdul, "but they can only be solved within the context of Islamic law." "Islamic law, it seems to me, is the problem," cut in Ari. "The Iron Curtain is horrendous. But what about the Islamic curtain? It has to come down too. You can't even be a citizen of Saudi Arabia unless you're a Muslim. Talk about a denial of minority rights. It has to change." "It's a religious matter for Muslims to work out," said Abdul, sounding offended. "Religious matter? You can't cover up a denial of basic human rights with that excuse." "Saudi Arabia is an Islamic state," argued Abdul. "France isn't a Catholic state, and the United States isn't a Christian state. Don't you see the difference?" "There's a world community of nations," Ari reminded him. "We need world peace, and we can't have it without full Muslim participation. Arab countries have to become democratic. It's that simple." "I'm not arguing that," agreed Abdul, "but don't expect Muslims to abandon the Quran. Arab democracy has to take a different form than in the West. Don't try to impose a Western solution upon the Arabs. It won't work. There has to be an Arab solution for whatever may be wrong in the Arab world." "Exactly," responded Ari. "There's no thought of bringing in outsiders to lead Arabs. A major purpose of this survey would be to find qualified Arab leadership among the students in Muslim lands." "I'm glad to hear that." In fact, continued Ari, we need Islam. That's why I'm concerned about its abuse of human rights. What do you mean, you need Islam? Demanded Abdul. I was telling Niki before you got here how the Pope made a deal with Reagan back in '82, and how they've been working together to bring down communism in Eastern Europe. In fact, the Catholic Church is playing the key role. They kept solidarity alive, and that's going to be the downfall of communism in Poland, and as a result, throughout Eastern Europe, and eventually the world. Interesting, mused Abdul. I remember you talking about that in a seminar. And that's the kind of role that Islam and the local mosques have to play in the Middle East, continued Ari, in bringing in democracy. Abdul nodded, though not with great enthusiasm. So long as Islam is effecting the change, I can't argue. Good. Ari paused and studied Abdul for a moment. What I want to know is, could you spend the next 6 weeks in the Middle East heading up a survey team without letting any of your own opinions get in the way? And would you want to? Abdul was silent for a few moments. When at last he spoke, it was with deep conviction and careful choice of words. It would be a challenge I'd like to accept. I'm willing to take a fresh look at everything. And I think I could do a good job for whoever these people are. Great, exclaimed Ari, reaching out to shake Abdul's hand. You're hired. Of course, you're on probation to begin with, and I don't know when you'll meet your real bosses, but if they're happy with this first job, then there'll be much more, probably involving moving back to Jerusalem. I'd love to do that. When do I start? And, well, you never mentioned the pay. You start immediately. The pay is good. 30,000 francs for the 6-week assignment plus travel expenses. Is that okay? Yes, of course. Ari pulled a thick folder out of his briefcase and handed it to Abdul. These people you'll be working for are well organized. Here's a complete schedule of where you're to be and when. Hotel reservations with a payment method through a bank here in Paris. You just have to sign. There's a check for half of your salary, plus another $10,000 for you to turn into traveler's checks and use for hiring survey takers in each location to assist you, for printing the extra forms you'll need, and for miscellaneous expenses. All of the instructions are in there, including several phone numbers to call in case of questions or any emergency. This is so sudden, stammered Abdul. I'm overwhelmed. Ari paid the waiter, and the three of them stood to leave. He put an arm around Abdul's shoulders and gave him a fatherly hug. You've got 2 days, Ari explained, to study the material before your plane leaves Paris for your first stop in Damascus. Airline tickets will be delivered to you tomorrow morning. I am excited for you, Abdy, said Nicole. Send me some postcards. Remember, I'm out of the picture now, Ari reminded him. But when you get back to Paris, let me know how it went.